Are authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Good evening. In a moment, headliners. Let's bring you the latest news headlines first. And our top story on GB News. The Immigration Minister today announced plans to stop housing asylum seekers in hotels and instead place them in disused military bases. Admitting that the use of hotels had in some cases harmed towns, Robert Jenrick said migrants will now be placed in sites at Essex, Lincolnshire and East Sussex. The accommodation will be guarded by a 24-hour security team and meet migrants' essential living needs. The Daily Mail says the Duke of Sussex's privacy claim against them should be rejected in its entirety and has been brought in far too late. Associated Newspapers says the legal challenges brought by Prince Harry and other celebrities, including Sir Elton John, have no real prospects of succeeding. But the legal team for Harry and others have described the publisher's bid as hopeless and plainly inappropriate. The government's announced a £1 million funding boost for synagogues and schools in a bid to crack down on anti-Semitic crime. The government says it also wants to ensure criminals who threaten Jewish communities to feel the full force of the law. The funding will cover security measures such as CCTV and new alarm systems. A quarter of religiously motivated hate crimes in the UK between 2021 and 2022 targeted the Jewish community. Now, the Queen Consort is said to be deeply saddened at the death of TV presenter and dog lover Paul O'Grady, who's died last night suddenly at the age of 67. She said his warm heart and infectious humour lit up the lives of so many. And his partner, Andre Portasio, said he died unexpectedly but peacefully. The German president has hailed a new chapter in relations between his country and the UK as he welcomed the King and Queen Consort to a state banquet tonight in Berlin. And a warning if you're watching on television, there are some flashing images coming up. King Charles and Camilla have been greeting guests arriving at the Bellevue Palace before sitting down to dinner. President Steinmeier and his wife, and thanking the King for choosing Germany as his first foreign visit. It was the first foreign visit as the head of the royal family, and the President of Germany described that as a tremendous personal gesture. Lastly, 4 cheetah cubs have been born in India, 70 years since their virtual extinction. It's part of the country's 13-year effort to restore the species. India joined the United Nations pledge last year to conserve 30% of its land and ocean area by 2030, but only 6% of its territory is currently protected. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for headliners.
Hello, I'm Josh Howie, and welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight to demolish Thursday's newspapers are 2 wrecking ball comedians in Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. How are you, gentlemen?
I'm not doing that well. I'm about to do a TV show, and I'm not prepared for it.
Well, that's because we spent the last 2 hours talking about our different diets.
Are you ever prepared, Lewis? You do a very good impression of not being prepared.
But you know what? I try to prepare, but I'm one of those people. I'm not like you. I'm not 137 IQ.
Yeah. It's not like this is your job or anything now, Lewis.
No, but
actually reading these newspapers.
Should I be given more time because I'm not quite as smart as Nick Dixon?
Yeah, I don't think you understand how it works. These are tomorrow's newspapers that we get early to read. I think this is going to be tough.
Can I get them a day in advance so we can advance?
Well, of course, yeah. I'll speak to the conspiracy people. Right, let's have a quick dash through Thursday's front pages. The Daily Mail, children put at risk by gender ideology in schools. The Telegraph, households to face net zero penalty for gas use. I'm winning. Guardian, government defies expert with huge gamble on carbon capture. iPaper, MPs demand inquiry after Sunak gave budget boost to firm linked with his wife. Express, fears of revolt, halt pension age rise. And finally, the Daily Star, the Sun's falling to bits, part 2. And those are your front pages. I did them the quick. Kicking off an in-depth look into your papers, your favourite paper, Nick, The Guardian.
Love it, mate. Love it. A couple of interesting stories in The Guardian. They got ministers urged to act on religious oppression, which is things like, this is Colin Bloom has issued this report on things like unregulated faith schools, forced marriage, religious nationalism. And the Guardian...
It's all about my life, mate.
Yeah, the Guardian doesn't really want to say who's doing this, but then it does say that this is later that this is going to bolster Gove's calls for stricter oversight on Islamic groups in particular, which they claim has sparked anger from British Muslims. But they do. It's also apparently Sikh nationalism is apparently an issue, which I didn't know about. But and then the Muslim councils responded sort of vaguely, saying there remains a lack of any meaningful engagement by the government with diverse British Muslim communities. Not really sure what that means, but it seems like they're actually trying to do something in this report to tackle, things like forced marriage and unregulated faith schools. So that's a positive if it happens. And then this other story, government...
I just want to stick with that one for one second. Yeah. Lewis, Jews, we get mentioned in that little article there.
Well, they have to throw us in. It's one of those situations where they've got to throw everybody in to make it seem fair, like left-wing terrorism, right-wing terrorism, Muslim terrorism. They've got to just make everybody. It's.
But there is an argument that there is an issue with the Orthodox Jewish community, with the schools, with the yeshivas, where they're not necessarily learning the basic subjects, English and whatever. They're spending too much time, arguably, studying the Torah.
They only learn Yiddish. We did that story, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a... And also, there's another quite interesting angle on the story, which I thought you might like, Nick. They sort of want to promote, actually, religion as well and talk about the benefits of it. Because, of course, we grew up in this society where we're told, all religions are evil and created all wars and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a religious... I go to synagogue, and there's a lot of benefit to having a faith.
What do they mean by oppression?
Well...
who are they oppressing?
Who are we talking about? Oh, what, people in general? Well, it's just like the idea that religions are behind all evil in humanity, which I...
It's kind of like how you're being oppressed, Lewis, on the show, by they make you read the stories early and things like that. It's like mistreatment. Do you mean the dictionary definition of it, or do you mean who's oppressing
Wait,
who?
are you kidding?
No.
All right, we've already got off the rails. I was sort of betting it would be about 10 minutes in, but we managed it at 2 minutes. Tell us about the other story, Nick.
The other story is just, we're just doing the carbon one. Don't worry, Lewis. It's the government defies experts with huge gamble on carbon capture. At least that's how the Guardian's framing it. And I think it just means that we're actually using our North Sea oil. So instead of... they're going to put a bet on technology to capture and store carbon dioxide in undersea caverns. And Shaps is talking about this and saying they're calling it the Powering Up Britain strategy. And they're saying that we need to transition using oil and gas. We can't just completely...
Well, it's an interesting idea because it turns out that we've got something that the rest of Europe doesn't have, Brexit, and but we have these giant caverns beneath us, and we can store supposedly all of Europe's bad stuff. Is that what it says in here? Bad stuff? Yeah,
Storing all of Europe's bad stuff underground.
All the bad
stuff. Story.
In those caverns for 250 years or 250 years worth.
Ursula von der Leyen will be down there.
But the question is whether this technology will ever develop enough to make that feasible.
Right, and hopefully in 250 years they will have discovered that maybe CO2 does cause problems.
Oh, really? And then we can... Oh, really? OK, fine. But there are some parts of that bill that people say maybe didn't go far enough. They didn't do anything really about home insulation, which arguably does make a huge difference. And also, they haven't lifted this ban on onshore wind farms. What do you think about that, Nick?
You really think I've got a salient take on wind farms on a story I've just been given like a minute ago? I don't know about wind. I don't care about wind. I would ban wind.
You're the wind farm guy.
That's
your Twitter handle.
Are you saying you're not prepared?
No,
Did he just say that? He said, I'm not prepared to read about wind farms. I'll talk about wind farms.
Go on, you do a bit on wind farms.
Give us your wind farm take.
What was the question?
Do you like wind farms?
I don't like wind farms.
OK, moving on to the next paper.
I don't like this story again because, I mean, the people out there...
This is the Telegraph,
they're so bored with the climate change question.
Well, OK, let's talk about the
story
here.
This is GB News. These people don't care about.
They care very much. Let's go to the next one. Telegraph next. Story about meat. This is you. You don't need the research for this, right?
Yeah, and you know what? The reason this is on the front page is because they don't want us to eat meat. They want us to die. And it says rotten meat may have been sent to supermarkets for years. What does that mean? Rotten meat may have been. You know, anything could have happened. And they're saying that the food agency arrested 3 people because this one firm in the north was like leaving meat out that could have been unfrozen and then frozen again and not frozen and it's rotten. The thing about meat is our stomachs.
Here we go. Here we go.
Yeah,
can you just do it? You've got 20 seconds, sell the meat thing, and then we'll never talk about meat during the show.
Our stomachs are one of the most acidic stomachs in the entire animal kingdom.
Okay, cool.
And we can handle eating
All
a
right,
little bit of rotten
meat. I would like
to say what the story's actually about,
yes,
though.
Please,
Should we try that? It's just about how rotten meat may have been sold unwittingly to supermarkets for years, right? And it could have been left to thaw out on the floor.
I said that.
You did say that.
But I know, but the thing is, the good point is Lewis will still eat it, right? As long as it's not cooked.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He will eat thawing out.
But by the way, can we just do a little shout out to Farmers Weekly? Well done, Farmers Weekly. You uncovered this story with your journalism.
They don't get enough praise.
People aren't talking about. If they can also start talking about investigating some of the other issues within our society.
This is the problem. The problem is when you have the government regulating the food, which sounds like a really good idea, but it should be up to the companies themselves that buy this product.
But they obviously failed that. That's the point.
Well, then they should be sued. It shouldn't be the government.
Well, I think it's too late now. We already sort of got rid of it through our system. Let's go to the Mail now, Nick.
Yeah, so the Mail have got children put at risk by gender ideology in schools. And we talked about this a lot. People like Miriam Cates have done good work trying to expose this. People didn't realise how bad it's got in schools. So child welfare is in danger from gender identity theory. It says teenagers are letting people change their names or uniforms without parents or professionals being alerted. It's this strange thing. Don't tell your parents. This weird thing that's developed in schools. This comes from the Policy Exchange think tank. So hopefully people are finally waking up to the problem of sex education in schools, gender ideology in schools, and so on.
And also things like single-sex toilets that have basically been proven to not work. Certainly in an environment like school, you've got a girl, I believe some boy just kicked the door in and she got a big gash on her head. You've also got there's a lot of talk of boys sort of putting camera phones up. It's just, you don't want to, there's the whole point that you have the boys and the girls' toilets.
Right, and the same reason you have boys and girls' schools, and maybe girls shouldn't go to school.
Okay, you took it to that next level.
Is that what you're saying? Well, that
is not what I'm saying. That's very much what you just said.
No, but that's where this leads to. When you separate, eventually one of them goes off.
So you think, throw it all out with the bathwater.
That's the ultimate agenda.
I am saying there are people out there that are listening to this and saying, it's a slippery slope to
switching women, off, yes.
To taking women.
to Iran, basically.
Yeah. And yes, it is.
No one's saying that. There's not anyone say that.
Why don't we just deal with the single-sex toilets in the schools first, and we'll deal with all that other stuff later, Lewis. But Lewis, you have kids, but I think they kind of escaped this. They're a bit older now.
They were taken away.
They're in their 20s. I don't let them into girls' bathrooms.
Okay, that's the thing. Yeah,
it's not me that doesn't go into girls'
It's interesting how this started very much as a seemingly somewhat fringe topic online, and now you have the front page. Children put at risk by gender ideology in schools. The fact is that people now know what gender ideology is, what it means. This is just very much a recent phenomenon in the last 2 years or so.
It's taken a long time to penetrate into the mainstream consciousness. We've known about it. I was trying to tell my parents about this stuff, and they thought I was nuts, all these kind of issues. Now they admit that I'm right.
Yeah, and when you show them evidence, they're like, no. And now we literally see it here, and finally, thank God. Right, finally, we're going to end with the Star story about the Sun, Lewis.
Well, it's interesting, the Daily Star, which is talking about our sun, which is a star. But as everything to do, what they're saying is there's a sunspot. Okay. They don't call it sunspots anymore. It doesn't sound that scary. They call it holes. There's a hole in the sun. And the hole in the sun is pushing out a lot of I don't understand how the sun works. And the truth is that all the physicists out there don't understand how it works either.
This is a very highbrow article for the Star, right? There's a lot of science in this article.
Yeah, there's a lot of science, and all the science is wrong.
They've done a lot of Wikipedia clipping.
Yeah. But all the science is wrong, because the sun is not falling to bits. The sun is the end of... the sun is like a lightning rod with all the universal electricity that's floating around there, aiming for this one spot. At any moment, the electricity could go to another spot. spot, and we would not have a son.
It was like a really weird children's TV program. Lewis explained science.
I was actually entranced. I don't know about you, but I was just like,
mesmerised by
electricity,
strange
and now
chaos.
I'm hypnotised.
Yes, and people who are listening, no one will know who this guy is. Velikovsky, I'm going to say it.
I thought you were talking about yourself.
Every single...
It's apparently it's a gaping coronal hole which we've all struggled with.
But is that after? I mean, I've had that after a few curries.
It's tough,
yeah.
Josh. But what I find weird is
coronal hole. What could be after drinking Corona? You could have a coronal.
Why is it always the Star that's covering this? I always think this is either wrong or it's a massive story that the other papers are ignoring, which is the sun is falling apart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It isn't.
If they're right, it's huge.
It is a huge story because at any moment, like I said, the whole.
Do it again.
The whole.
No, don't do it again. But I will say it's like Men in Black, where they get their actual news from the more sort of tabloid newspapers, don't they?
National Enquirer and stuff,
whatnot.
and it's real.
But there is something. I mean, look, before we go to break, is there going to have any ramifications? They're saying that these kind of sunspots can take out mobile networks, stop phones, stop radio. I mean, is that likely to happen?
I am concerned, but then again, the person I've consulted is Lewis.
Yes. I would.
Okay.
I would say this. We cannot be concerned. There was something that happened in 1859 called the Carrington Incident, where it was a huge electric infusion on Earth, and it turned off everything. Luckily, at the time, there was nothing much to turn off in 1859.
OK, well, thank you, Lewis. I think what that means is you'll be totally fine, everybody. Don't listen to what he says, do the total opposite. Coming up, we have The Guardian and its links to slavery, why black Californians could be getting reparations, and why we must act to stop AI now before it takes over the world.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today. Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
after I say what I'm going to say.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Josh Howie. Older American, less mentally stable me, Lewis Schaefer, and lives near me, Nick Dixon.
What about you, Josh?
Well, yeah, fine. Lewis, let's kick off this section with Thursday's Guardian. And is the idea to take from Peter to give to Peter?
Well, do you know what? Very well. Well, not quite well said. This is one of the most interesting stories that I have seen.
It was well said.
This is a real story that the Guardian's come up with, and Nick probably has missed the real story element of this, but it says overseas aid budget cut to meet soaring costs of housing refugees in the UK. Basically, no one knew about this, but that every dollar that is spent on refugees in this country gets taken away from some poor country's money that they would get. So they have no idea how much money is going to go to some starving person in some starving place because of the people coming here. So it's kind of like, so the government is not penalized for letting all these billions of people. They just take it off of the
overseas aid.
The overseas aid. And this is according to the Independent Commission for Aid Impact. It's absolutely brilliant, because at the same time it comes up with money to house these undeserving refugees. It basically creates more refugees in the countries that they come from because we're not giving them any money.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, Nick. I mean, you see a lot of commentators on this channel as well saying, you know, this is spending UK money and whatnot, but it actually turns out that this was money that was already allocated to be sent abroad, so it's not costing us anything extra. And there is an argument that we're actually spending the money that was going to be spent abroad within the UK to our hotels and all the other companies here, and it's staying within the UK now.
Yeah, I suppose critics would say a couple of things. They might say, well, is state aid set at the right level anyway? Maybe it's too high. They might say, or the other thing is, you're saying it's within the country, but it's refugees and hotels, so people might still say, you know, what about other people who are not refugees, cost of living crisis, etc. I'm not necessarily saying that. I just think if we've got, I mean, couldn't Gary Lineker fund this with his 4.9 million? Well, he's got a 4.9 million. He's got a 4.9 million outstanding tax bill.
Yeah, but we're talking about 3.5 billion.
I know it's a slight shortfall.
He's been let off the hook.
I didn't check that. There was a decimal place.
You know, you've been let
and
off the
actually,
hook.
Lewis, you made a very, very valid point. There he goes. Split that one up. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the idea behind the aid budget in the first place is it's to send that money to other parts of the world to raise their health, to raise the income, to raise the opportunities that they have. So they want to stay there and not come here. If we're spending that money already, it is a sort of chicken and the egg situation here, and we seem to be doing it the wrong way round.
No, but in their minds, they're doing it the right way because they want immigrants to come here. Those people in charge of everything, the Rishi Sunaks, they want mass immigration because somebody has to pick their strawberries, somebody's got to paint their houses, their apartment buildings that they own. They want immigration.
It's true. I would halt immigration, including Lewis Schaefer.
It's too late now.
He has to go, I'm afraid.
All right, Thursday's Telegraph next. And Nick, it turns out that what the Nazis really hated were ultra-low emission zones.
Yes, that was what really got them going. That's how it all started. So Sadiq Khan claims Nazi sympathisers have latched onto anti-Ulez protests. He said this before. He's saying it again. He's doubling down. It was a disgusting thing the first time.
He was saying right-wing before, or he seemed to be suggesting... now he's saying, like, Nazis.
Yeah, I think he did say things like that, and he listed Tories in there. But now he's changed that slightly. He said, my worry is that they're latching on to decent Tories, decent people who oppose the Ulez expansion, but there are also Nazis. Now, I mean, ridiculous. We've seen this tactic with Kelly J. Keane in New Zealand. You call someone far right, it's a green light to do whatever you want to them. It's a way of shutting down the argument. These are people who don't want to pay the Ulez charge because it's awful. I'm hoping it's going to be Khan's poll tax and people will just rebel against it, which they are doing.
How are they rebelling?
Well, people, you know, they're protesting. Some people have, they've shut down cameras. I saw something the other day where someone had just driven through this. Oh, no, that was the 15-minute cities. But anyway, they're sort of generally protesting and rebelling. But the funny thing is, Emily Thornberry here says she saw at least one swastika with Mr. Khan's face on it. Isn't that calling Khan a Nazi more likely for his Ulez? Like, if you wouldn't really have a swastika with his face if you were a Nazi, would you? So that might... Now, there might be some actual bad people there, like with most
maybe
protests.
Khan's the leader of the Nazi party.
Well, that might be what they're implying with the sign. I mean, there might be some people that are generally bad people. It usually happens. Some people might be planted there. That also happens. Maybe not at these. It happens in big protests in America. Or, you know, it's just smearing your opponents as far right.
Well, I think there's a few interesting things here. Lewis, first of all, it's quite interesting that I think this is the first time we've ever heard a Labour politician talk about the decent Tories.
Yeah.
That's quite nice.
Well, he's divided. He actually believes there might be decent Tories.
But the other thing is that the implicit idea that it's only going to be the Tories who are the protesting against it, where I know a lot of Labour supporters who are very much against this policy.
Well, I think what he means, and I think this is what's happening now, that silo theory, which we've discussed, is there's no room for overlap. There's no Venn diagrams anymore. If you're either with us 100% or you're against us 100%. And he's saying, if you're not with us on the Ulez thing, you are a Tory.
By definition.
By definition.
No, of course it is. Well, that's what they've said about the trans rights issue, even though, as you know, I'm a bit of a lefty, but at the same time, because I've been supporting women's rights, that makes me by default a far right, whatever. Yeah. But this is, and I just want to say what you were saying exactly. That narrative is dangerous and has had, horrible implications in New Zealand, as we saw. But it's an interesting thing where these Nazis, neo-Nazis, turned up at this event, Let Women Speak, and then all the people, all the trans activists were like, well, look, now they're neo-Nazi. But they weren't invited by these women. These women are mostly left-wing women. And then they were like, well, why didn't they challenge them? It's like, you're meant to be the anti-fascists, and you're mostly men, and none of you stood up to actually do it. But you expect these women to fight them off?
Yeah, nonsense.
It is a weird thing.
And by the way, just on your question about what people are doing, they've cut the wires of these cameras, they've painted over the lenses, so people are like aggressively against this. And it's not good enough to
breaking the law.
Well, it's not good enough to just say that they're far right, they just hate the policy.
Yeah, well, we'll see if it makes an impact at the next election, I guess.
But keep in mind that, I wrote it down, that claiming fascism or Nazism is the last resort of the scoundrel.
Thank you so much. And thank you for writing that down, Lewis. A real intellectual. Andrew Doyle would have just remembered that one. But you're just like, remember, the thing of the thing is the thing. On to The Guardian next.
I tried to be prepared.
Good for you, mate. Good for you.
Next time, don't admit that you've written it down.
On to The Guardian next. And Lewis, it seems like wherever The Guardian goes, everyone must follow.
Well, this is another one of those Guardian stories because they're like totally involved in slavery links and things like that. And the UK, despicable. And it says the UK government and royals called on to investigate slavery links after the Guardian apology, which is when they apologise because they had some role in slavery. Everybody had a role in slavery.
Guardian started slavery, everyone knows that.
Yeah.
Okay, and they put 10 million pounds for reparations. I mean, I'll speak for Josh here. Have you gotten your money from Egyptian slavery that we had to live under?
Not yet.
Not yet. So where is our money?
2,000 years.
2,000 years.
We've been waiting for that.
We've been waiting. And my bicycle was stolen. Where's reparations for my bicycle stolen when I was 12 years old in Great Neck, Long Island? Anyway.
And you're saying that it was the slave trade took your...
Did you write that one down as well?
I did.
Please don't write. Please delete that.
I'll delete it. It never happened.
What do you think, Nick? I mean, the people here, who are the people who are saying that now everybody else has to do it? And is the Guardian just also deflecting a little bit? Like, we're sorry, we did some stuff. Now let's just... all of you need to apologise now.
Well, exactly. It was hilarious when it was happening to The Guardian because they've lectured us all on racism, and then it was very funny that they were the ones behind slavery, as you say. Very funny, but now it's annoying because now UN experts, some sort of oxymoron, are coming in saying that we've got to investigate the British government and the royal family. They're saying it's laudable what the Guardian's done, but my hope is that those who've suffered the consequences of their past actions will benefit from the sums, blah, blah. But they're just saying that everyone has to do it now, so it's going to be very hand-wringing and boring and go on forever. And actually, you bring up an interesting point about everyone's oppression, and I go back to mine, where a Lancashire... My family is from Lancashire, half of them.
Yeah.
A Lancashire cotton mill worker had I think it was a life expectancy that was half that of a slave living at the same time. So what about reparations for the Industrial Revolution?
It's interesting, because my descendants owned a Lancashire shopping. One more thing I just want to say about this. One of the UN experts, Professor Vereen A. Shepherd, says the British state has refused to apologise and then simply uttering meaningless statements of regret, remorse and deep sorrow. That sounds like an apology to me. Also, she also keeps on going on about this, not when she wants reparations or whatever, not saying the actual word, but that's what it is. Sums committed in, but she says not a top-down way, which is the way that The Guardian is doing it, allocating it to programmes. I think what she's saying is Just give us the money.
Divide it into everything.
Yeah.
I think when this whole thing is over, this reparations business, is we're going to demand an apology for those people being so patronizing on everybody.
How much do you want?
I don't know. Did I pronounce the word properly?
I hope it's a proper apology. Sticking with The Guardian, especially as now they're experts in reparations, perhaps they can help advise California, Nick.
Yeah, so this is reparations to black Californians could cost over $800 billion, economists tell State. And that would be 2.5 times the state's annual budget. And this doesn't even include a recommended $1 million per older black resident for health disparities they've suffered that shortened their average lifespan. So it's this reparations madness again. This would bankrupt California. It would be an injustice for everyone living now. So obviously we have historical injustices, but you can't just fix it. I mean, someone here is saying it's going to be a real hurdle. How do you compensate for hundreds of years of harm, even 150 years post-slavery? Well, obviously you can't. And the fact, the salient point as well is that California was never a slave state. Current taxpayers are not responsible for these historical injustices. So it's absolutely ludicrous. It can't possibly work. And I'd also add, and Scott Adams said it, he's not the most popular guy at the moment because he's been cancelled, but he said it's not a successful attitude to always be looking back as an individual or a group. So I don't think it's going to work. Yes, slavery was horrific, but how is this going to fix anything? And what about the people living now? It's not feasible.
I mean, do you think that this money is actually realistically going to be going out to people?
Well, I think it'll go out to people in different ways. I mean, there's money that's always been going out to people quietly.
They're talking sums here of $1 million, 2.5 million.
Well, the way the economy is going in California, they might not. They say it's 2.5 times the budget. As soon as all the rich people leave the state, there'll be the budget.
Well, there's another argument here because the governor, I believe, set up this advisory committee thing in the wake of what happened with George Floyd, and sort of say, oh, we're going to set this up. Do you think that was somewhat of a deflection tactic to go, look, we are going to start talking about reparations and then hope that this stuff goes away?
I tell you what I think. I think he thought there were very few black people living in California because those leftist white people don't know very many black people. So he thought, well, we can give them this money because I don't know any black people.
OK, I would just like to officially state that's not what happened.
You wrote it down, though.
Oh, you wrote it down, really? OK, quick break now, but come back for Trans Day of Vengeance, why Guy Pearce's apology to them probably won't be enough, and Adidas versus Black Lives Matter. Surely one of those stories is going to get us cancelled. See you in 2.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners, and we received a text during the interval from Lewis's son, who said that the show is, I quote, quite good. Thank you so much.
He's not American, my son.
Let's go to Thursday's Telegraph. Nick, perhaps this isn't the best time for this protest.
Yeah, Trans Day of Vengeance protest to hit Washington in wake of Nashville shooting. This is organised by the Trans Radical Activist Network. And this poster that's been getting banned off Twitter, it says Trans Day of Vengeance, and it says Stop Trans Genocide. So these people actually think there's a genocide of trans people. Now, whether some people are disingenuously spreading that, or whether they actually genuinely believe it in some sort of deluded
They're
state.
disingenuously spreading it, and then people genuinely
and then certain people believe it. Especially if they're mentally disturbed, they then do crazy things. So it's completely, it's terrible. And obviously, vengeance, generally not great. Maybe if it's John Wick or a Clint Eastwood Western, but generally not a great thing to have a day of vengeance.
Then they are later saying, oh no, it's about unity, not inciting violence.
Yes.
Vengeance is not the word for that.
And this comes from the Trans Radical Activist Network. There was another thing, Trans Resistance Network, very similar thing, that said the Nashville shooting isn't one tragedy, it's two, because we also have to think about what inspired the person to do it. And this has been absolutely disgusting. The media coverage of this, NBC was saying, but what about the trans people that could now be sort of persecuted? And Reuters described it as a former Christian school former student. It's like, no, I mean, the media's trying to cover it up in a disgusting way and change the narrative. And it's all been pretty appalling. What happened is 3 kids were killed and 3 adults, absolutely disgusting, possibly a hate crime against Christians, which we'll wait and see when the manifesto comes out. The mainstream media treatment of it has been appalling. This Trans Day of Vengeance has to not go ahead. It's a terrible thing, and that's all.
It's terrible timing, but even with this event not happening, it's a somewhat ridiculous event, because this idea that there's a genocide happening is massively false. I mean, numbers are just going through the roof. That's the point. It's an ideology that's captured, arguably, certainly young teenage girls. And the other thing is that the reason they're doing it is because of this proposed legislation, and they say to ban gender-affirming care across the US. No, it's to ban gender-affirming care to children.
Right.
That's the point.
And gender-affirming care being a euphemism for basically
just like
mutilating
instantly,
children.
you are that person. And also, by the way, then they use words like we're the most at-risk community and stuff. This all started from a statistic of black Brazilian prostitutes. Black Brazilian trans prostitutes. So when everyone said, oh, the rates of murder is the highest of whatever, that's the statistic that's always used. Actually, the fact is in the UK, it's very, very few, and certainly over the last 10 years. And, when you have women being killed every 2 days or so, I know there's obviously a disparity between percentages and whatnot, but it just seems incredible. Also, I like their thing on the post, they say, wear a mask.
Well, because that's the solace that they're in. It's the wear a mask is the trans thing. This thing is really tragic, the trans story, because it's, as I say, it's the death of love. It's these people are basically willingly being castrated. They're being neutered. They're preventing themselves from having children forever for this. And these are children who want to go ahead with this whatever they are. They're 10, 20, 30 years old. And it's
well, some of them we've had teenage girls, 12-year-old girls, and going on these hormones. Yeah. And it's been proven, like you say, they become infertile.
And I think the worst thing about it is sort of the desire to be a victim. These are people who are not necessarily victims to begin with, and they feel the need to actually be a victim, and the way they become a victim is by whatever maybe it's...
Well, that's meant to be seen as a positive thing for them.
Yeah.
But I agree in terms of this constant thing of trying to appropriate the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, all these institutions around America and the West, arguably, have utterly capitulated to this ideology. And really, this is all kicking off. You know why they want a day of vengeance? Because now some people are going, you know what? No, I'm sorry. You can't go have access to women's spaces. You can't be a male rapist in a woman's jail. You can't go into female sports and compete unfairly. And that, for them, requires vengeance.
And the fact that the media has promoted it, and the fact that the mainstream politicians that we saw in New Zealand and Australia, that politician in Tasmania, using... Well, I don't know if I can say the word, but he used a different word for TERFs. But he said he changed it to TERDS, and he called Kelly J a dropkicker. And they've given a green light for violence against women.
Right, the Time's next. And Lewis, you're a Hollywood actor, soon to be seen in the background of the new Indiana Jones movie.
Yes,
did you make your character trans?
Well, it was filmed in the subway down there.
Okay, you could have been trans.
We were trans. We were transported.
Oh, literally, okay.
Yeah, literally trans.
Tell us about the story.
Well, this is Guy Pearce, who I've heard of, but I have no idea who he is.
Memento, LA Confidential, and Neighbours, most famously of all.
Was he in Neighbours? Well, all those Australians. I think if you go to Australia, 2/3 of the population have been in Neighbours. He basically tweeted the most shocking thing that you could ever tweet, which is the truth.
Oh.
Which is saying, he tweeted, should only people allowed to play trans characters be trans? Or can any actor? Why should we limit the career of an actor to only
he also then said, or does that mean that trans people can only play trans people, basically?
Yeah.
Right. So basically, that is the truth. He doesn't want trans people to only play trans people. He wants them to be full actors if they get the part. It's just the truth.
Yeah, but Nick, is this also the thing that, there's, people say, oh, only trans people can play trans actors, but, and then they can also play whatever actor, but then there seems to be these two different
only goes one way. Yeah. He's saying it should go both ways. Actors should be able to act and be anyone. It's an art form. But, of course, activists don't care about art. He still cares about the art form of acting, and he's naively thought, hey, people will agree with this because it's logical, and like Lewis says, it's the truth. But this being the world we're in, he was immediately attacked for this obviously true statement, and he had to back down and say that he shouldn't have done it on Twitter, and particularly he shouldn't be talking about it, given he has a full house of privilege. So he pathetically capitulated to the bullies when he actually made a correct point.
The only person I know with a full house of privilege is Lewis.
Yeah, but he said two things that were wrong. He did two things that were wrong, besides the initial tweet. He deleted the tweet, as if it could be forgotten. As soon as you delete it, suddenly people are paying more attention to it. You can never unseeing it. It's
Okay, no, I agree with you, but we're never going to hear that second point because we're moving on to Thursday's Guardian now, which unbelievably has a fascinating article about trademark requests, Nick.
Yeah, so Adidas backtracks on opposition to Black Lives Matter trademark requests. They said that the three stripes were too similar to their logo. And now this is interesting because people say money dictates everything, we're in capitalism, this is what dictates decisions, but actually that's not the case in woke capitalism, and we see it very clearly here. A source close to the company told Reuters the U-turn was prompted by fears people could misinterpret the objection as criticism of BLM's mission. And that's the thing you can't do. You can't criticise this discredited...
What's the mission? Destroy the nuclear family.
Destroy the nuclear family, defund the police, this totally discredited organisation with such fear of upsetting them that they actually withdrew. And do they have a habit of withdrawing? Not really. They filed 90 lawsuits, Adidas, signed more than 200 settlement agreements since 2008. So they will crush companies.
Here we go. We can see it now. Do you think that's confusing? Can we have another look?
That's just me again. Sorry, I'm not part of Adidas.
Already.
But if it was a small company who are unknown, Adidas would just crush them. But because it's Black Lives Matter, they're terrified and they back down. That shows you where the real power is.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Lewis? Would they back down for any other organisation? I mean, say Black Lives Matter had made their logo like a big M, and they also started selling burgers and whatnot.
Well, the interesting thing is I've seen the logo, and I can comment on this because my father was a trademark attorney.
Oh, OK, here we go. Something not written down coming out of your mouth.
So
what's the comment?
The comment is...
Oh, here we go, yeah.
The comment is...
So they do... Would you confuse those two?
No,
there's a bit of...
No, that's not the right... There's another picture where there's three lines coming out the top of it, and it looks much more similar.
Oh, OK, so I'm not...
So what do you... So anyway, what's your point, mate?
My point is, based on the information I'm given right now, that looks like it cannot be protected.
Thank you so much. Expert
And that's
from
from-
Lewis Schaefer's father. May God rest his soul. God bless his soul.
Rest his soul.
God rest his soul. I don't know many dead people. Moving on to Thursday's Telegraph. And Lewis, I've been trying pretty hard in this article.
Yeah.
But is this article where you're going to go too far finally?
I don't think it is, because I think this is an Andrew Doyle. God bless Andrew Doyle. He would love this thing.
He's still alive, by the way.
I could see him talking about this. It says hate crime experts to rule. This is the story you're talking about. To rule whether the English countryside harbors rural racism. And so the Lever Brothers charity, the guys who own Lever Brothers, because of their inherent racism over the years, are producing soap which makes people clean, which maybe sort of...
I think it goes back a bit further than that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's inherent as much as the original
As
company.
just soap.
Well, no, they invested in plantations and whatnot.
Yeah, so it says they invested in plantations, so they want to check to make sure that ethnic minority hikers don't face open hostility when out walking.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, do you have anything to say about this?
I have a lot to say about it. I'm furious about it, of course, because it's about the country. I mean, I'm from the country for a start, but look, we dealt with this aspect of this story before, that there's this concern that the countryside is an exclusively English environment. Now, what is wrong with an exclusively English environment in England? Look,
so English doesn't mean white in my mind. When I hear English, I don't think white people.
No, it shouldn't. But it's very, very strange. You've got Unilever, a charity established by a plantation-owning soap magnate behind Unilever. It's the Lever Hume Trust, whatever they're called. So these people they were involved with slavery in the past, and now they're involved with trying to get rid of this small race, which is English people. Like, if you went to the Amazon or something,
I don't think they're trying to get rid of.
Why? No, what they're saying, Josh,
people.
is they're saying that you can't have an English environment in England, in this small island that happens to have English people.
I don't think that's what they're saying either. I think they're just talking more about inclusion and just investigating this stuff. This feels to me like another kind of...
Well, you're not even letting me make my point. You're with your wrong point. They're saying it's inherently rural racism. They're basically saying it's racist to just exist as an English person in England. If you were some big company like Unilever and you went to the Amazon and said, right, this tribe, we're wiping it out now, it would be horrific. Why can't you have English people in England in the countryside?
Look, mate, this is actually more of a study to find out if there's that racism, but
it's nonsense.
I'm sure we'll cover that more. Miraculously, we've still made it this far on air. Join us after the break for a story about Lewis's day job, children's birthday party entertainer, the reasons Nick is happy that he gave up stand-up, and a woman who takes self-love to the next level. Join us there.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
16 or 15.
I stopped talking about racism. Welcome back to Headliners. A story now for Nick in the Star that I think we all can relate to, 3 of us. At least the jar bit, right?
Yeah, comedian left urinating in a jar after heckler attacks him with... and gives him a broken leg. It's a terribly written headline, but that's what happened. And this is terrible. This is Simon Kane. This is not the Simon Kane I know. There's a different Simon Kane from Billingham. And this was terrible. I mean... basically, he said the heckler was already messing around with the microphone before the gig, which one of the worst things.
If you see that someone walking up on the stage,
I know. Get off the stage,
Red
mate.
flag.
Sit down, shut up.
Yeah.
We need to stop romanticising hecklers. They are scum, OK? What's the best heckle you've received? When they shut up, paid, and then left. That's the good one. It's disgusting. And this guy came up and just broke his leg because they had they had a disagreement on stage. And it's not surprising in a culture where words are violence and where we don't really understand basic decorum at a stand-up gig. Stand-up's about free speech, playing with the boundaries of speech, things like this. People don't understand this anymore.
Not if you're Alfie Brown.
No, right, well, yeah, there you go. Then they just attack. Or Josh, it's just one nutter. But either way, I'm against hecklers.
Lewis, this guy, have you heard of him? Simon, what's his name? Simon Kane, you ever heard of him?
No, I haven't.
But he describes himself, I think he's from the more what we would call the mainstream circuit or, going into working men's clubs. Nothing wrong with that, whether they're telling sort of pub gags more. But he describes himself as one of the most outrageous comedians now in the UK. Yeah. Surely that's you, right?
We don't know. I
think that you're, surely. I mean, have you ever been hit on stage?
He thinks of Lewis as more of a thinker, not a comedian.
Oh, yeah, he writes stuff. Lewis writes stuff down, that's the difference. He doesn't remember his jokes, he just reads them from his notepad.
Well, I think I want to make sure that they're right. The audience wants me to make sure that they're right. I've never been hit on stage.
Yeah.
But I can understand. You don't mess with a microphone.
I had to defend you once. I nearly got beaten up for you.
When was this?
I told you this story.
Oh, you did?
I don't want to go into what the material was, but he got very offended, and I literally nearly got beaten up because I had to deal with this guy. But I've been nearly beaten up a bunch of times. But I've had bouncers.
Really, that surprises me.
Yeah, I know. I started a riot in Manchester. And then also I was down in the Comedia, and I was taking the mickey out of some guys. It was very hacky stuff, like talking like, look, they're not going to sleep with you guys. You can just stop trying to sort of peacock around them or whatever. Anyway, it got really offended. They sort of rushed the stage, and then all these bouncers appeared out of nowhere and just saved me at the last moment. And then I had to walk to the train station. I was terrified I was going to get beaten up on the way back. And
I want to know how you started a riot, but maybe we don't have time. How did you start a riot in Manchester?
Think of my set.
Your personality and jokes. I get it now.
Yeah, it's something along those lines, yeah. It's pretty crazy. The Metro next. And Lewis, I know Florence... did you know the actress Florence Pugh? Her name rhymes with poo. But what's her problem with wee?
With wee? Well, the problem isn't just with wee. She doesn't like water. And one of the benefits of not drinking water is you don't pee. But you also could die. And her name is Pugh. Pugh. I thought it was Puch. Florence Puch.
That's because you're Jewish. That's what we speak.
I didn't know. But she talks about... So she hates water, and she was talking to James Antcast and Ed Graham.
So former friends of ours before we came on this show?
Oh, no.
Hi, guys!
No, they didn't like me even at the time.
Oh, really?
No,
You've always been on the outside.
No, not always in the beginning.
They always knew what I was like.
I've known them a long time, both of them.
They bad mouth. But so she's basically saying she doesn't want to drink water, which is very inflammatory.
Literally
inflammatory. But the truth is, there's a big debate over water.
Oh, my God.
I knew it. I knew he was going to answer this. Lewis thinks that water dehydrates you. He thinks Lewis... There it is. Water dehydrates you. That's Lewis's position.
Is that so? Did your dad tell you
dangerous
that?
misinformation.
I have read that. Or I saw a YouTube video, one of the other.
You tried to tell me the other day. Water
the
dehydrates you.
To your father must have been like, the electricity, and you just go, and Dad, I miss you.
That's the most iconoclastic Schaefer position. Water dehydrates you. Think about that. You're in the desert. Lewis Schaefer's like, don't drink water, whatever you do.
You know what? Google it. The people out there are going to Google it.
He's
After
a
they
water
Google
truther. That's what we're dealing with.
Is that we don't need as much water if we eat raw food. It's not even raw food, if we eat raw meat. The problem with the food that we eat, the cooking dehydrates.
Lewis thinks flat earthers are too mainstream. He's like, it's a cone.
Yeah, Nick, you got anything to say about this?
I've got loads.
Okay.
Basically, it's a non-story. It's a non-story, as Lewis would say. He's actually right this time. Basically, it's this woman who's saying she just want to drink water, and you think, OK, people have gone mad, they're detached from their bodies, and they've gone mad. But you realise it's just a joke she made on a podcast.
Oh, really? Great. All right, well, let's see what happens with staying with the Metro, Nick. And has this given you any ideas?
So, an Australian radio presenter, how dare you, marries herself because why wait until you've met the one? And this is a sad story about Erin Molan, who's a presenter, and her daughter said, it'd be fun, marry yourself. And so she did it because she's a 39-year-old single mother saying she'll probably never get married. And in some ways, it's just a radio stunt. In other ways, it's a sad indictment of our times and a symbol of the future in our society.
Yes, it is really sad. It's one of the saddest stories I've come across. She's a beautiful woman. She's 39 years old. She has met the one because there are millions of guys who would go out with this girl. I looked at her picture. She's beautiful. She has a 4-year-old kid. So maybe the father of her kid was the one.
OK, well...
But marriage is broken. Relationships are broken.
And Lewis,
it's all over.
You're getting married, aren't you?
No.
So, that's what you said before.
To himself.
Oh, to himself. Fine. OK, the show is nearly over.
There are thousands
Oh, sorry. Yes, I don't want to get rid of your
no
female
water,
fan base.
No water at the reception, but everything will be written down.
The show's nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages. We are going to go to the Daily Mail. Children put at risk by gender ideology in schools. The Telegraph, households to face net zero penalty for gas use. Guardian, government defies expert with huge gamble on carbon capture. These papers are not coming up. I'm winning, by the way, at the end here. iPaper, MPs demand inquiry after Sunak gave budget boost to firm linked with his wife and expressed fears of result, halt pension age rise. I hope you didn't need the papers there. Finally, the Daily Star, the Sun's falling to bits, part 2. Those are your front pages, or at least my words about the front pages. That is our show done for tonight. Thank you to iconoclastic guests Lewis Schaefer and Nick Dixon. Headlines will be back tomorrow, 11, with myself, Nick Dixon and Leo Kurz. And remember, if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned for The Breakfast Show.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Former military bases are to be commandeered to house young men that cross the English Channel in inflatable dinghies. Will this stop the boats? Will it save money? Or was the whole thing a complete fraud? We'll go up to Shropshire, ask why Michael Gove has just approved a giant solar farm and see how local campaigners feel about it. Gordon Chang, expert on China, will tell us what they've been up to around the world in the last few weeks. And joining me on Talking Pints, when he played a lot of football for Tottenham Hotspur, he then became a London black cabbie. Yes, Mickey Hazard joins me on Talking Pints. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening. The top story on GB News tonight, the Immigration Minister has announced plans to stop housing asylum seekers in hotels and instead place them in disused military bases. Admitting that the use of hotels had harmed some towns, Robert Jenrick said migrants will now be placed at sites in Essex, Lincolnshire and East Sussex. The accommodation will be guarded by 24-hour security and meet migrants' essential living needs.
These hotels